Hello, everyone. Today we are with Authors Promotion Show. We had a little bit delay in our show, but again, we have her. We have Dr. Liz Bataille, and she has a book called Life Launch. She's medical director and best-selling author. I'm so happy to have you in my show, Liz.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. All right, Liz. Tell me about yourself first, and how did you become an author, a best-selling author, and then talk about your book.
Yeah, so I have historically been for a good number of years both a professor in natural sciences and biology and anatomy and physiology, and also working in the medical field in clinical laboratory medicine, and I got my doctorate in clinical chemistry. And so I have been doing that over there on that side, and then of course I have my personal life and my private life, and I have been using a lot of the clinical chemistry that I know about and that I've learned about, especially stress response and things like that, and your subconscious and your autonomic nervous system and things like that when you're dealing with some of the abuses and the traumas that I talk about in the book. And I also have a bachelor's degree in nutrition science. So nutrition has been a big part of my healing as well. So when I got to a place in my life where I had more time on my hands and was between jobs, and thought, you know what, I think it's time to write that book now because, I have this concentrated period of time, and I was really kind of stimulated to do it by the Me Too movement, because my story includes, some experiences that I had with sexual abuse and some kind of domestic violence. I have a whole nother book in my head about uh, getting sexual discrimination on the job, and that's a different book there too. But I thought it was important for what I consider an average American person to share their story in the public realm, because we were hearing so much from actors and actresses, and I was thinking, hey, me three, like this has happened to me too. And I'm sure that it's happened to a lot of females since I had written the book, not just females, males too. But since I wrote the book, I heard a lot of people say, that's happened to me too, that's happened to me too. And um, I just realized, you know what, I feel like it's important that I get my story out there and be another example to people that part of the healing process is sharing your story. And I hope that my story can help others. And that's my
Yes,
mission.
thank you. Yeah, it will definitely. I'm also PTSD coach. That's why I have another show, PTSD Self Healing, and I have lots of interviews around sexual abuse and the post trauma after those years of abuse and childhood problems. And I've heard a lot about how we can do the recovery, and everybody has her own methodology to recover. What was your method to recover from those trauma?
Right. Um, I did not realize that I had a method, of recovering. And if you look in my book, what I shared was kind of like a journey, and looking back into my past from my eyes now, I realized that there were really, healing things that I did, and I include some of those in there. I share with readers in each of my sections. At the end, I share some prayers and some meditations that I felt related to what I was going through at that stage or with those issues, because I have like a section on alcoholism and drug abuse, which is part of my physical abuse, was me abusing myself. And then I have some on the section about the sexual abuse and so on. And but I experienced these things that I call in my book my saving graces, because I I really was a teenager, and I was really a tween, when things really started with me, with the real traumatic, experiences. And one of them was the loss of my brother in a car accident, which I'm sure you know, and you share about it on your show. They have these lists of things that are like the number one, number two, number three life events that are stressful. The major stressors: death, moving, and like I think divorce or something. And those are like the top three. And so I experienced a lot of those early on in my life as a young person. And so one of my saving graces was music, listening to music, listening to the lyrics, and recognizing and identifying that, hey, there's people out there that have gone through some of this. They're sharing in a artistic form, what I related to is, hey, that sounds like they're talking about their struggles with drugs or alcohol, and they're definitely talking about, you know, uh, sexual abuse or domestic violence. So that was important to me. Again, identification through storytelling and knowing that I'm not alone. And what I found when I finished writing the book, Pantia, was that hope is really the driving force behind everything. Every little saving grace that I had: prayer and meditation, like I said, music, I had athletics. I was fortunate enough to be able to be in some, sports through high school. And then I carried on my own, like swimming. I was a competitive swimmer, but then I did that and it was good for my mind. I even had friends tell me in high school, you need to go, swim some laps, because they always knew I was so relaxed when I would come out of there. The rhythm of that. I also played an instrument. I played piano, and I sang, and sometimes I would literally be driven to play the piano to get my emotions out, just to sit there and focus on something else, let the stuff that my brain was working on be in the background. And I think all of those things are important, and they're not I'm not sharing that, these are things that somebody has to do, but you will find, whoever's listening, find your things that make you.
Exactly.
Hmm. Yeah. And so the nutrition was another one too. I started getting into nutrition when I was 15, and just trying to take care of myself better, because I actually had migraines since I was in third grade, and I had sleepwalking nightmares since I was in third grade. So I really had a lot of those psychosomatic, those stress related disorders. And they didn't get much better as I grew up. And then the book ends with me reaching the age of 25, and that's when I got into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and that really started a new phase of my life, and it really started my healing.
You
So,
know, you
mhm.
actually pointed to very similar things that others challenge as well. And the point is, when we read such a story, we can have shortcuts because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of methods there, like what you mentioned. You use journaling, that I did as well. It helped me a lot. I also use instruments. I
Mhm.
used to play violin and singing, music, this kind of healing. It's very moving because it can change your mood right away.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Absolutely. Those are mood altering activities,
yes,
instead of mood altering drugs, I found these things.
exactly.
Yeah, mood
Yeah.
altering. And I want to also point out, you don't have to even be able to sing to be able to release through your voice. If anybody's out there listening, I did primal scream therapy, and I would get in my car and just like just let it out. They have people. Some people use pillows and they scream in their pillows or they punch their pillows if that's something, not from an aggression standpoint, but I went into an inpatient program for 1 week when I was like 29. I had about 4 years clean, and I still felt like I was still really sick. I felt like I was still really in the weeds and I hadn't uncovered this stuff yet. I mean, I've just turned, I was over 55 when I wrote that book, and putting it all on paper and seeing it all at one time was a big realization for me. So that goes to show you how insidious this stuff can be. But what I was going to say was they taught me in this place about expressing, meaning getting it out of your body, the negative energy goes to your PTSD, right? This negative stuff that stays in our body and is housed in our body. It can make us ill with all these other disorders. And they may have come from emotions and feelings and traumas that we experience. So one of the ways is called the Bataka bat, where you take a plastic bat and you have a certain motion with your body and you hit a pillow. Um, and the whole idea is to get it out, get that negative energy out. And I know I cried. Crying was huge for me. I cried at every single AA meeting I went to for the whole first year, and I didn't know what I was crying about. It was just my grief, it was just years and years and years of, shame also from my addiction and things that I did in my addiction and all the other stuff, the losses of my brother and other people in my life from the suicides, my own suicidal ideation that I had for so many years. I was crying for myself, my childhood, and so on and so forth. But another thing is wringing a towel and just going. That was my way because I'm not a violent person. So for me, it was just I grabbed the towel and I wrung this towel for 4 days straight at this healing place. And then another one is yelling at the wall, pick a point on the wall and just do your yelling at that if you're a yeller. But these are some ways that people can do in their own homes or their own private spaces to try to get this negativity out of our bodies.
I like it. It was so touching because I remember mine. I don't want to like talk about the PTSD I had right now because I talk about it a lot. I had an accident and then I had PTSD afterward. But you always first you think that why this happened to you, and that's why you're yelling and you want to find a reason for it. But then you realize you have to take the responsibility to heal yourself, and healing starts from within when you start. And as you see in support groups, the first thing they said is emphasizing expressing yourself and telling your story to others. And that's, to me, it's very powerful because by the time you don't process your PTSD, that's going to stay there forever. And it's not only that one, because I'm also a fertility coach. I see a lot of PTSD in childhood can also affect your fertility power, and a lot of infertility reason comes from PTSD. So I like the way you talk about it. Like expressing and releasing starts from when you want to talk about it and get it out, and that's the first step. Then what you did after you did yelling, and I know that's the first step.
Well, so, the book has become a vehicle for me to get in touch, as I said, with all of these healing strategies. And starting with, yes, the telling of my story, which I had told many times over, but in pieces. I would tell this person about this piece because that may have been what we were talking about, but I didn't see it until it was all written down. So, one of the things that has come out of the book has been, this whole what I call it an authorpreneur, type business, which is I want to reach as many people as possible. And I want to go back to what you said about, all of these ideas. That was exactly my idea about why I wanted to publish a book, because I wasn't just somebody that experienced loss of a sibling or of a family member. I wasn't just somebody that experienced addiction. I wasn't just somebody that only had this one, sexual abuse or whatever. I experienced so many things. I said, you know what? I'm going to make a list. How many traumas did I experience? So I have on my website, which you're putting up here on the bottom line here on this live, and I have a link on my website for a free PDF for anybody that's listening that wants to go and get it, called My Healing Resources. And on it, I list, there was about 30 plus, somewhere between 30 and 35, when I finally listed them out, what all the traumas were that I experienced. And that was unbelievable to me when you really think about it. Wow. It was part of my healing process was to see it and to give myself to feel that weight and know, hey, you've gotten your master's, your doctorate after a lot of these things happen. Not all of these things, because I had other horrible losses in my later life. That's going to be in my book too. But then I said, what are all the healing things that I've done? Like we've already said, we've already listed these things: prayer, music, whatever. Chiropractic has been big for me. Chiropractic therapy, primal scream therapy, all these things. And there's over 50 things listed there. So my biggest, I feel as though, because I did rank, and my number one bestseller ranking was mostly in suicide and sexuality and pregnancy, because I was a pregnant teen and had an abortion. And I talk about that in there. But my third husband, which is what's going to be in book 2, he ended his life. We had an almost 3-year-old child at the time that he ended his life by suicide. And I found him, and that was really my largest PTSD trauma, because it really was healing from PTSD, finding him and trying to give him CPR and that not working. But in I'm losing a little bit of track, but I think I know what I'm saying now. My biggest mission, is to prevent suicide. If the person is anywhere on this spectrum, it could ultimately lead to suicidal ideation, because I know it did with me. I know it's done with a lot of people, and that's where we get back to that hope again. So a person, in my studies of surviving suicide that I write about in the book, my own suicidal ideation, which I had at least 4 or 5 experiences that I talk about between the ages of 15 and 25 in my book. It's said in the literature that people that successfully complete suicide, they do 100 different things first. They try 100 different things first, and there's a list somewhere. And they get to a point where it's just that's what they do. It's not like it's a decision. It's just like that's the next thing that they do is take action on ending their life after they've tried these 100 things. So the way that I feel about it is, if a person is still really feeling like they're still struggling with any of these things that you talk about in your other show or that I write about in my book, I do have a list. I actually have a list of some things you can try, and you may say to yourself, I've tried this, I've tried that. What else can I do? You know what? Get some ideas, pull down that PDF. There's at least 50 ideas in there that I've listed that worked for me. Now, those are not like all the ideas, but I wanted to talk about only what I've done. I know there's things that I haven't tried, but what I list in there are actually things that I've done, and I firmly believe that it was cumulatively all those things that helped me get on the other side of especially the grief of my late husband's death. Um, but my whole life before that, but that has been my biggest challenge in my 40s and 50s, is getting on the other side of
You had
that death.
lots of burden as a
Mhm.
teenager, and
Yep. Mhm.
you were so lucky to overcome. because not everybody can do it.
Uh,
As a teenager, it's so difficult. And the problem is, teenagers usually don't talk even to their parents about their issue. They may have a lot of hidden, uh, suppressed emotions inside, and they may have a lot of issues. And when they commit suicide, their parents realize, wow, they had a lot of things they didn't tell them, and that's too much. But as you said, when there is 100 things you try to terminate your life, they should be on the other side. 50 things at least give you hope and continue your life, right?
right. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, what I realized in PTSD, and at the end, suicidal attempt, is distraction. You try to
Mhm.
find a distraction first, so you go and try different drugs and even alcohol, and for some time temporarily you are okay, but this distraction doesn't work for you, and at the end of the day you say, I need to terminate it because I cannot find another distraction.
Right.
So
Mhm.
that's what happened. But to me, distraction uh, was there. I needed what I did. I tried to learn new things. I tried to enter to new country, start a brand new life. At the end of the, like, I knew that I have a lot of unprocessed PTSD, but by making a lot of changes and new habits, I shifted my mindset. It took some time. I'm not saying that it's easy. It's very challenging, but it should start from you. I mean, it should start from you, and you should find some other ways and some
Mhm.
inspiration. If you find a little bit hope and some inspiration, something to keep you alive, and something, a reason to keep you in this world, then it you should try it.
Absolutely. Absolutely use it. Grab onto any little thing that gets you to the next step. And that's why I said I've asked myself many times, why? Why did I have to do all those different things? And I realized it's because I did this thing and it worked for me for that time. Whatever that time was, it may have only been a week or a day or whatever. Or like for instance, with the playing the piano, I can only benefit from that when I'm actually doing that. So yeah, I mean, these are things that I started I had the ability. I didn't have the ability when I was a teenager. I'm glad you mentioned that because my ranking on Amazon for bestseller in actually two countries, Canada, United States, and actually three countries, UK, I was number one. And then in Australia, I was like number three or number four for months, was in teen and young adult categories of these social issues. And because my book was written about my life as a teen and a young adult for book one, um, and so that is the trick right there, is when you don't have the means. I was glad that my mother, she heard me say when I was 15 the words, it's not going to matter anymore. And she was like, what do you mean by that? And my meaning was, I'm not going to be here. And I may have said, because I'm not going to be around. And she said, what does that mean? And I didn't say to her, what I wanted to do. I just said, it means that I'm not going to be around anymore. So it's not going to matter. Meaning, like, for her to yell at me or whatever, in my case. Um, and she knew what that meant. She knew what that meant. I didn't remember this, but she's told me, even like a couple weeks ago when I was talking to her, she's still so mad at me that I wrote this. Apparently, I had a suicide pact with my boyfriend, and I had written a letter that she found that we were going to go down to the woods and do the Romeo and Juliet thing, I guess, or something. And I don't even remember that, but I think the combination of those things, and she took me to a counselor right away. So I'm very grateful for that, because my late husband, I found out after his death, that he had actually written a letter when he was in high school, and they found it in school that he was going to end his life, and he never got taken to counseling by his parents. And so I feel as though that was a first step for me. But, some people don't have that. Some kids aren't going to have that, and they may not say it like we're talking about right here. I, I wrote the book because I wanted other people to see that you can write this stuff down, or you can talk about it. And I mean, I'm not proud of a lot of things in that book. It's very graphic. I mean, it's very real. And and I but I feel that it's most important for anybody else to that might read it, that looks at it and says, wow, she told a, the whole world about all this stuff. And maybe I can just tell one person then, because I really feel as though it has to start by opening up your mouth, because if you keep it inside of you, you have less of a chance to get help. And then you may not find the healing that you need. And
So,
that's what I'm trying to prevent.
Liz, how parents can realize their children have this problem?
That is a
And
good
yeah.
question. Because my son actually did go through it. Since his father passed away, wasn't quite 3. He grew up with going over to other kids' homes for sleepovers, and they had a mom and a dad, and it would bring it up for him, and he felt so sad. And so, you know, it was hard for him. It was very hard for him. He felt very different, and he felt that loss. He felt that, and he first time somebody told me, and I kept my eye on him a lot, because I knew that I had the ideation, and I knew that his dad actually took action on that. So I knew that there was a chance my son could have either a mental illness or something, depression or whatever. But I think for me, each time it ended up being told to me because from another kid. So the first time, oh, he did. He was in a room with some kids, and I was at a meeting in another room. And when I was asking, where is he? And the child came out and said, he's in the room hiding underneath a chair. And I said, why? And the child said he said that he was going to grab those scissors on the top shelf and stab himself. So he said that to another child, and that child told me. And then I took him to counseling right away because I knew that it worked for me. And then about 2 years later, we moved, and there was a little girl that he wanted, he asked to be his girlfriend in 4th grade or something. And so this was this was now 6th grade. And no, I think the first one was, yeah, that's true. The first one was probably 2nd grade. This was 4th grade. He was young, and he was talking about ending his life. But this one, it was the school. I think it was the school that called because he had told a kid that he wanted to end his life because this girl broke up with him, and she was kind of a little bit cruel about it. And and that's the way they are sometimes. But they, thank God, they told me, and I took him back to a counselor again. And this counselor actually, again, it was a combination, I think, of my son's age. He really reached my son, and he really just talked about actually like rational thought. I don't know what the therapy is, but he basically got my son to realize that that is really kind of an unwise idea, like that. It's sort of like, I think he kind of communicated to him that that is a short-term solution, you know, a long-term solution for a short-term problem. I think my son was able to grasp that, and he realized, and he told me at one point, he was like, Mom, you don't need to worry about me anymore. I'm good. I realized that that is really not a smart decision, not a wise thought process to think about ending your life because of something like that. A kid, broke up with me or whatever, girl broke up with me, because I thought, oh my gosh, like, what is he going to go through? He's going to have a lot of breakups in front of him. But I think for me, it was, don't be afraid to take your child to a professional if you feel as though there's something that doesn't seem right, whether you hear like the actual words or not. And then the other thing, to answer your question, I think would be, I was told this by a medical doctor that I used to work for, who's a brilliant person and has his own business with genetic therapies and stuff. He said that anybody that expresses in any way, shape, or form a thought of ending their life, even if it's a thought and then they're not taking action or whatever, anything that is in that line, you should receive that. Anybody that's hearing that, it should constitute a medical emergency. And I think that is where many of us are off track. And I know that my husband said things to other people, not well, he did to me about a month before, but I was sharing with him that I had the thought too. I went to a meeting and shared about it. He didn't. But even a week before he ended his life, he had shared about it with a friend of his. And, you know, we all thought that, you know, he changed his mind, or we talked him out of it. His friend said, I thought I talked him out of it, you know? Um, so I think we really need to be more on a higher alert when anybody indicates anything like that, and
Mm.
realize this is a medical emergency. So,
Because in my life, I've seen a lot of teenagers do it, and some of them are successful in ending their life, unfortunately. And that affect parents, and because when they see their teenagers are not responding to them and are not even cooperating to go to counselor, then they cannot do anything. I mean, they don't do anything, and what but they can do.
yeah,
you know
uh, I've
it,
had those
it should
folks.
start from themselves, right? There should be some awareness, or the parents should talk to their teenagers, be close enough to
Mhm.
ask them to talk to them, and just if they just leave them to themselves, you don't know what's happening there, or what kind of friends are going to you know
Well, that's the yes, and that's what I was saying, watching them. And like I said, I was watching my son when he was younger, but I will say that since then, and he's been in his tweens and now he's 18, we did have some periods there at 14, 15, 16 that I really did watch him extremely closely. And he used to call me helicopter mom, and I would say to him, in as measured a tone and caring as I could without the alarm. I would say, honey, you know, I need to do this because this is my job as your mother. I wasn't afraid of being, teens are going to try to push you away as a parent by calling you those names, helicopter mom and stuff. I said, you know what? I am glad that I'm a helicopter mom, because I've seen some of the parenting from some of your friends and I don't agree with that. Or he'll say, why don't you let me do this? And I say, because this is the type of parent that I am. And you're not allowed to do that in my home. And if you go over there, just because that parent allows your friend to do it, it doesn't mean that you're allowed to do it. And I would talk to other parents and I would tell other parents, this is not, my son is not permitted to do this, and so is that going to be a problem? And try to get those other parents to, you know, buy into what I allow for my son when my son is at your house, kind of thing. So again, I think it comes down to communication. There's just too many things that we just don't communicate upon. And I think there's fear, or there's um, maybe parents want to be the friend of your teenager, and sometimes to save your own child's life or health, you can't be their friend. You have to be their parent, and in some cases you have to be, the heavy, in order to save their own life, and they will eventually realize it eventually. And I know my son and we're having a good relationship right now. We go through some stages, but I will tell him if we get to a place where I'm not happy, I'll say to him, this hurts me. I would like for us to have a better relationship right now. What can we do? What can we do differently? And I'll ask him to join with me in that conversation for how we can
Mhm.
make it better together.
That's the
So,
best way. That's the best way to do.
mhm.
Can you
Yeah.
show us your book?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, another thing, so we've been talking about this all along, but that's why I called it Life Launch, because in the book it has a storm on the front of it. And I think there's like a little boat somewhere on this thing. But it was on the original picture. Anyway, myself, when I was this age, this was inside of me. The storm was always raging inside of me. And from getting free from a lot of these things by all these methods we've been talking about, but really writing it down, I've been able to launch my life into and beyond, as you said in here, my little quote, beyond the wildest storms, of my life. I've been able to launch it into my next book is going to be called like a new dawn. Each day is a new beginning, is going to have a sunrise and a rainbow over top of it, because that's what I've launched my life into after working through all these things. And that's what I want to share with people.
Yeah, this
You know.
is actually a very powerful book. I'm gonna share it with my PTSD group, my clients as well, because people who have teenage should know how to be closer to their kids and how to understand the symptoms of these negative thoughts that it may lead to
Mhm.
suicide. Yeah.
Right, right.
All right. What's your feeling after seeing your book published for the first time?
Oh my gosh, it was so amazing. I did get help through the self-publishing school, and uh, and it's Amazon, as I mentioned. That it's the ebook predominantly that got the rankings and so on. But I have been selling the print book, and then I did put out an audio book in November of 2019, like 6 months after I published the ebook and the print book. And the audiobook is another accomplishment and another really good feeling, because some people don't want to read, in either respect. And there's some real power through the audiobook. And the woman that I had read it, I did not feel like I could emotionally actually read it, um, for that one, because it was a lot. It took a lot out of me to write it, and I just didn't feel like I could get through it functionally. So I did have to ask somebody else to read it. But she has a voice that's similar to mine, and I felt like she does have some similarities in our story. And so I think you'll be in good hands with that. But I would say just an unbelievable accomplishment. I have a video over there on my YouTube channel, if anybody gets a chance to look at it, that talks about how I was told when I was 15 years old from a friend of mine who heard some of my story up to that point. He said, "You need to write a book about your life." And I've actually been wanting to do it all along. And I've actually, over the years, these, 40 some years, I've typed up little things and played around with titles and had ideas in my mind. But finally, through self publishing school and being in between jobs, I put it all on paper. It took me 30 days to write the rough draft, 40,000 words. And then another 60, 70, about 75 days to edit and then go through the publishing process. So it's really been an amazing journey. And I have a poetry book that's going to be coming out, and probably in another month, I think. And that is, again, my writing. So writing, even when I was a teenager, I wrote poetry that I talked about my confusion with life and what is life about. And I talk about God. I have writings, poetry and prose, about God, about relationships, about my teenage loves, and about death, because my brother passed away when I was almost, it was actually 2 weeks before I turned 13. So it was a very critical time in my life when he was killed in a car accident. It was actually a drunk driving accident. So, everything is so related, unfortunately, in that aspect of my life. But yeah, I talk about all those things in poetry from when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, and then
Beautiful.
all the way up until last year when I did my first Facebook Live with Ende Labadins on nutrition and smoothies, and I wrote a poem about smoothies. So that's going to be in the book too. So
Beautiful.
maybe I
As
should write
soon
one about PTSD.
Yes, yes, sure. Yeah, you already talk about PTSD.
Maybe
That's
I should write a
exactly the same
poem
thing.
about it. That's what I was
Maybe,
thinking,
maybe,
right?
yeah, why not? As soon as you start writing your book, I know the first one is a bit challenging. Mine, as you said, I always had this idea that I have to bring those on the paper and then write it this way, that way. Whenever I had in the lunchtime at office, I always write. And after 2 years, finally, I published my book after 2 years of writing it. But and then the second one was easy. The third one was easier. As soon as you have done it for the first time, all the barriers that you had from publishing a book, it's
Mm.
gone, because you right now which editor you're gonna choose. After sometimes you find the best one, and how to format your book, how to do the cover. Actually, right now I'm doing most of it by myself. I do my cover formatting, and even on Ingram and or the paperback Amazon, I do it myself. But I mean, this is a journey that after
Mhm.
sometimes after you start, as soon as you start it, is getting much easier as soon
Oh,
as you've
thank you
done it.
so much for that. I appreciate that. I've been a little bit ashamed, I guess, that book 2 is taking so long to come out, but a lot of it has been the promotion, as I was telling you, the audiobook first, and then sort of the promotion and coronavirus pandemic last year.
Yeah,
With all the traveling, I was really kind of staying in a different place because I was in Houston, and that's crazy down there. So I kind of came to more of a country place and state where there was very little coronavirus until June. We didn't even have a case until June. So I was out of my element a little bit and trying to reestablish my ways and my habits and my writing in this other place. So eventually I moved here in December. So this is this is now my new normal. And
beautiful.
so yeah,
Okay, thank you so much for being
thank
here.
you.
All right, if you want to buy her book, it's in Amazon. She also have website, as you see. Dr. Lee's Lunch, Dr. Lee's Life Lunch is her website, and she has the same for Instagram and Facebook.
Yes,
Beautiful.
perfect.
All right, thank you so much for being here. I wish to see you again.
We will. Let's do.
Yes,
And
thank
thank
you.
you so much. And thanks everybody
Bye.
for listening and watching.
Bye.